Hello there, my name's Scott and today I'm going to be doing a review on the Satburn 22 Genesis Atomiser, which I received directly from the manufacturer. Now at this moment in time these are only available via the manufacturer's sub-forum on the Vape Pit forum, but he has told me eventually we'll get his own website and then you'll just be able to go along to the site, add to cart and check out as normal. But for the time being they are only available via the Vape Pit forum, and you can go along to the sort of Satburn section and you should be able to find the information now. Before I start, I must point out I did receive it free of charge for the purpose of conducting a review, but my opinion of the product remained true, honest and accurate as always. Okay, let's go straight ahead and show you in a bit more detail. Okay, so here I have the Satburn 22, which is a Genesis style atomiser. And when you get one of these, in addition, you also receive a bag containing some spare parts. Now in that bag you will find a spare negative screw, a spare set of O-rings, an additional stainless steel tank. So you can either have it set up with a glass tank or a stainless steel tank. And you also get a rather handy hybrid adapter. Now what you can do with this is screw it directly onto the base of the Satburn 22, and then from there you can screw it directly onto any device that uses a 20x1 threading, such as the body of the Versa Hybrid for example, or things like the Caravella. Okay, so the Satburn 22 is manufactured by a guy called Satburn, who's a very highly respected mod maker on the Vape Pit forum, and at its widest point it's 22mm in diameter, hence the name Satburn 22. Made out of 304 grade stainless steel, the overall build quality is excellent. It really is a very sort of top-notch atomiser. All the parts go together beautifully. There's no rough edges, there's no sharp edges, no burrs or scratches. No, just a very nicely machined piece. It's slightly unusual in design. We have the wider part here, which is basically the tank section, and it gets a little bit slimmer towards the atomiser deck and a little bit slimmer towards the mouthpiece, which is also included by the way. But once you see it with the top cap removed, you probably get a good idea of why he went with that design. Another thing I really like about this atomiser is the finish. It's not polished and it's not brushed either. It's sort of it's almost somewhere in between, and best way I can sort of really describe it is a matte finish with a sort of a slight shimmer to it. Just a very nice finish. Okay, so what I'll do now then is just give you a quick guided tour around the outside, and then I'll take it apart, show you how it all fits together, and then finally show you how I've been getting my one all set up. Okay, so on the base you have a 510 connection, and in the middle there you have a adjustable brass centre pin. Now if you're going to use the atomiser with the hybrid adapter on something like your Caravella for example, you will need to undo that screw quite far in order to obviously eliminate battery rattle and get a good contact. But that screw is quite long, so you can extend it, quite a fair old way. And I've tried it on, several devices with the 20x1 threading, and it works great. Now the tank section of the Satburn 22 for me is quite deceptive because it doesn't look like it's going to hold much juice, but with the glass section installed it holds 3ml of e-liquid, or if you swap this piece over for the stainless steel tank then it holds 3.4ml. The top cap has twin air holes and each air hole is 0.8mm in diameter, and I really like the way it's been sort of milled out slightly to sink them down a little bit. The top cap is held in place by a single O-ring, but it's held very firmly in place. And on the atomiser deck you have two wick holes. One is 2.2mm in diameter and the other one is 2.5mm. For your terminals you have a very simple flathead screw for the negative, and for your positive you have a brass nut. Inside the top cap you can see you have this highly reduced chamber, which I know a lot of people like. And on top it's going to come included with this mouthpiece or drip tip, whatever you want to call it. Now you can use other drip tips with the Satburn 22, but you're going to be very limited, and you also may have to make some sort of a modification to it. And the reason being is that this one's been made specifically for this atomiser, and as you can probably see it's actually quite short in length from this point to this point. So this means that other regular drip tips, when you go to push those in, they won't be able to push in all the way. But this is a really nice drip tip to use though, and it suits it perfectly. Okay, so here I have the main parts that make up the Satburn 22. So that is going to be the base section with the 510 connector and adjustable centre pin. You then have the glass tank, or you can also use the stainless steel tank as well, of course. You then have the atomiser deck. the brass positive screw, the top cap, and then finally the drip tip. Okay, so to assemble the Satburn 22, as you can hopefully see, there's already been an O-ring installed there. And you're just going to take the either the glass tank or the stainless steel tank, slide it over the top and rest on top of the O-ring. And then you can take the Atomiser deck, which once again already has the O-ring installed there, slide it over the top and screw it all the way down. And once the Atomiser deck's been installed, you can take the little brass nut there and screw it onto the positive terminal. Okay, so for the next step, I need to obviously get a wick installed and wrap some coils. So for my wick, I'm going to be using some 400 stainless steel mesh, cut at a length of 30mm by a width of 20mm. I then rolled this up to form a nice tube and then heated it up in a hot flame for around 10 to 15 seconds. And for my wire, I'm going to be using some 32 gauge Canthal. Now you can quite easily set up the Satburn 22 in a sort of a traditional manner where you're going to obviously attach the wire to the negative terminal, then wrap your coils around the wick and then finish it off by attaching it to the positive. But with the Satburn 22, I just find it to be a little bit easier if I wrap the coils first, because I like to add 1 or 2 extra coils when using this atomizer, especially if I'm using this sort of really thick gauge wire. So I'm just going to be wrapping the coils first and then installing them into the Satburn 22. So I've got my wick here and I've just placed a syringe going through the centre there just to obviously strengthen it up. Makes it a little bit easier when it comes to wrapping your coils. And I'm probably going to add around sort of 5 or 6 coils. Okay, so as you can hopefully see, I've just installed the wick inside the tank, and all I need to do now is just simply attach it to the 2 terminals. And once that's done, you can just tidy it up a little bit if need be. And you should have something that looks a little bit like that. To remove the excess pieces of wire, you can use some cutters, but I just like to apply a bit of tension and give it a wiggle, and it should snap off nice and clean. Now before you fill out the tank with e-liquid, it's always really important to make sure that your coils are going to light up evenly and at the same time. Now I've just done a quick test fire and it seems to be pretty much perfect straight away, which is quite nice. So I don't think I need to do any adjustments at all on this occasion. So as you can hopefully see, it seems to be pretty good. Okay, so now I know that everything's all firing up correctly. What I need to do is take my bottle of e-liquid and fill the tank up with juice. Give that a second or two for the capillary action to start working, which it seems to have done already. We should get some vapour. Okay, so to finish everything off, just need to attach the top cap. And like with any Genesis atomizer, always make sure you put the air holes directly in front of the wick, and that will get you the most amount of vapour. Okay, so that is the Satburn 22. Let's go ahead, see what it vapes like. Okay, so that was the Satburn 22, and what I'll do now is go ahead and show you in action. So I'm going to be using it on a PAPS X. The battery came off the charger around 2 minutes ago, so should still be reading 4.2 volts. The resistance of the coil has come out at 0.7 ohms, which is a little bit lower than what I'd normally vape at.
I like to sort of try and get around sort of 1 to 1.2 ohms. Now the reason for that is because I was a bit of a dick ordering things at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm half asleep, and I accidentally ordered the wrong gauge wire. So it's a thicker wire than what I normally use, hence the lower resistance. Anyway, it's coming out at 0.7 ohms, and the tank has been filled up with some 18 milligram strength tobacco flavoured e-liquid, and it's a PG based e-liquid. Okay, so this is the Satburn 22. So as you can see, producing plenty of vapour. Obviously just bear in mind though that the amount of vapour you're going to get is going to come down to how you've actually got it set up with regards to resistance, the type of e-liquid, type of device you're going to use, whether it's just a straightforward mechanical device or variable voltage or variable wattage, where you've got it set to there. So basically just down to your own sort of personal preference, but nevertheless for the setup I've got here, still getting plenty of vapour. Flavour wise, you know, exactly what I'd expect from a nicely set up Genesis atomiser. Me personally, I find Genesis to be the sort of best sort of type of atomiser for bringing out the flavour of your e-liquid, and the Satburn 22 is no exception. Now, I know a lot of people tend to say that the reduced chamber brings out more flavour of your e-liquid. I wouldn't say it brings out more flavour, I think it gives you a slightly different flavour. If I sort of compare this to, say, the AC9 for example, which has quite a large chamber, I'd say they're both excellent for flavour production, but they're just sort of slightly different, and it's very hard to sort of try and explain, so you just have to sort of take my word for it really, but obviously it's all going to come down to sort of personal preference. You know, some people are going to like one thing, other people are going to like another. What I do find though with reduced chambers is that it makes the vapour come out a lot warmer, probably because there's not a great deal of sort of air to sort of circulate around the vapour to actually cool it down. So when you have that tiny little reduced chamber, you're always going to get a warm vape. Now you could sort of make a few adjustments to either make it even a little bit hotter or a little bit cooler by obviously increasing or decreasing the actual resistance of the coil. It's not going to make a massive amount of difference, so you're still going to get a pretty warm vape out of this, and especially with this sort of quite low ohm coil. If I was going to say 1 was a cold vape, 5 was a hot vape, you know, it's probably around sort of 4, 4.5, something like that. Just a really nice warm vapour, which is what I sort of prefer. The draw is a pretty tight draw. It's not too tight, but it's definitely not a loose draw, let's put it that way. You have the twin air holes there, and each one is 0.8 millimetres, so they are sort of little tiny air holes. Obviously you have 2 of them, so it makes the actual draw a little bit looser compared to if you only had a single 0.8 millimetre hole. But again, if I was going to say 1 was a loose draw, 5 was a tight draw, it's probably around 4, something like that. The ease of setup. Now, the video, it seems very easy, and I didn't have to do any adjustments at all. That was a little bit lucky because, as far as I can remember, that's the first time ever that I've actually set up the Satburn 22 and not had to make any sort of little nudges or adjustments to get all those coils to light up evenly at the same time. And that goes with any sort of Genesis atomiser. You know, it's a little bit of a fluke that time. Normally, you know, you're always going to do a little fine adjustments just to get rid of those hot spots or to make sure those coils are lighting up. But in terms of sort of, you know, wrapping your coils and getting everything actually sort of installed and set up, I find it to be quite simple. Now, in the video, I wrap the coils around the wick first. That's just how I find it easier with this particular atomiser. You know, you can still obviously use the sort of more traditional method of installing your wick first, then attaching your wire to the negative, then wrapping your coils, and then finishing off by attaching it to the positive. Whatever works for you, that's the best way. But for me, you know, it is a lot simpler if I just wrap the coils first, drop the wick in, and then boom, boom, just attach your 2 terminals, and you know, job done really. So for me, I find it to be a nice one to set up. Normally though, I do have to do quite a little bit of sort of jiggering and poking around with a little screwdriver to sort of give the coils a little bit of a nudge to get them all firing up correctly. in the video it did happen first time for whatever reason. That was a little bit lucky though. So in terms of setup, it is a nice easy one to set up, but in most circumstances you will have to obviously play around with your coils a little bit just to sort of get them all firing up nicely. But in terms of actually installing the wick, getting your coils wrapped, no, for me it's nice and easy. Just sort of randomly talk about something differently. I know quite a few people say to me, oh, you know, don't do the rings so often. I mean, I want to see how much of a cloud you can get, and that is why I don't know if people have actually noticed it because they're still complaining. But I try and do every other one now. Like, so one vape will be with a few rings, the next one won't be with a few rings. So hopefully people will pick up on that. And I'm trying to sort of please everybody. I do the rings because I like doing them. That's the way I vape. That's the way I used to smoke. That's what actually got me smoking in the first place, you know, when I was 15 years old. And I'm not going to change. So if you don't like it, it's tough. If you do like it, then great. But I'm trying to cater for everybody though. With rings. Without rings. There you go. Build quality, a top-notch atomizer. I mean, like the finish on this is absolutely perfect, and it's really hard to sort of try and explain because I think if anything, it's going to be classed as a brushed finish, but it's such a fine brush. Why can't I say the word brush? It's really annoying. It's such a fine brush that you can't really sort of see the actual brush part of it. It's almost like a matte finish, but it has a very sort of slight sort of glisten to it, or sheen. Not too sure what word would sort of describe it better, but that's the only way I can really describe it. It's like a matte finish with a slight sort of gleam or shimmer to it, and it's absolutely fantastic finish. No, it really is sort of absolutely faultless. The parts go together beautifully. You know, there's no rough edges, no burrs or anything like that. Just an extremely well machined little atty. And this is the sort of updated version, by the way. I mean, I did originally buy one of these probably, I can't remember how long ago, 3 or 4 months ago now, from the original list for the Satburn 22. And the only thing I can sort of see different with this one here is that the tank is slightly different. On the older version, the tank had little sort of grooves at the top and at the bottom which sort of fit in, and so the actual tank was sort of more sort of sunken in a little bit, so it had a little bit of a gap there. Well, not a gap, step, that's the word. Whereas now it's the actual tank is sort of completely flat, so it's more of a sort of seamless join there. And as far as I can tell, that's the only sort of real main difference between the original version and the updated version. And I think it definitely looks a little bit nicer with the way the tank's been done now. I'm really not too sure what else I can tell you about it. I mean, like, the only other sort of thing that's left to talk about, really, I suppose, is the look of it. It's quite an unusual look. It's got a very sort of unique, well, I say very unique. It's quite similar actually to, I think it's the 360 atomizer that I reviewed last month or the month before that. It's quite similar to that, and some people may like it, some people may not. Personally, I quite like it actually. It's, like I say, it's a very unusual design. This part here is basically just all the tank, then obviously you have the smaller bit, then it goes a little bit smaller, then a little bit smaller on top as well. And the other thing I need to talk about as well is the negatives that I've found, which aren't that many, but the only sort of real negatives I've got is, it's a shame about the drip tip. You can't really still use your own drip tips as such. You can do, but you will have to sort of shave a little bit off the bottom. Now, if you've got a Teflon drip tip, for example, or a plastic drip tip, it's no problem to get a bit of sandpaper out and just shave off the bottom of your drip tip so it fits in there nicely. If you've got a metal one, it's obviously going to be a little bit more of a pain in the butt. Having said that though, the included drip tip that comes with it is a really nice drip tip to use. Me personally, I do prefer to have a sort of a Teflon drip tip or a glass drip tip. I feel they just feel a little bit nicer sort of between your lips, so to speak. So that may put off some people, but like I said, for anybody who likes metal drip tips, it is a really nice drip tip to actually use. The other sort of a slight, well, it's not really a negative as such, but niggle, I suppose, is the best word, is that you have the 2 wick holes, but there's no sort of separate fill hole. Now, obviously, if you have a wick in one, excuse me, you have an open hole in the next to it, so you can obviously fit it that way. But where you don't have that 3rd hole, what I find is that depending on what sort of bottle you're using, you go to try and fill it up, and you get an airlock, and so it basically just forces the e-liquid up through the wick. So you will need to try and get yourself one of those bottles with the long sort of like the needle on the end of it, so it can go right inside the tank, and you have a little bit of air going around the outside of it as well to obviously prevent that airlock from happening. Excuse my voice. So if you're using like your regular sort of plastic dropper bottles with these sort of little rubbery nib on it, if you're going to completely block that hole where you're obviously using it to fill up with, it will force the juice up through the wick. But if you have got one of those bottles with the sort of longer needle on the end of it, or a syringe, it's no problem at all. Excuse my voice, I'm not too sure why it's going all croaky, but there you go. So, you know, apart from the drip tip issue and the slight niggle when it comes to actually filling up the tank, you know, it's an absolutely fantastic atomiser. Not too sure what else I can really tell you about it. If you fancy trying one out for yourself, you'll have to go along to the Vape Pip forum. But if you just wait a little while, eventually he will get his own website up and running, and I'll try and add that information either as an annotation, to the video, or if you're watching this video on my website, you'll find the link on the right hand side. Okay guys, I'm going to go before my voice completely gives up on me. Thank you very much for watching, and also come along and visit my website at www.e-cig-reviews.com. That's e-cig-reviews.com. Cheers guys, happy vaping, see you later.